Our next session, Advancing the Circular Economy, Collaborative Efforts to Deliver Value. Please welcome to the stage our moderator, Esther Wielden, co-host of the S&P All Things Sustainable, S&P Global Podcast, Ann Tracy, Chief Sustainability Officer, Colgate-Palmolive, Christopher Davidson, Vice President Sustainability Engagement, Smurfit Westrock, and Jim Tyre, Equity Research Analyst, Neuberger Berman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel on advancing the circular economy. Today, we'll explore how partnerships across industries are driving progress in the circular economy. We'll learn how regulatory changes, product innovation, and shared value creation are reshaping business-to-business relationships across the value chain. And so we're going to have three different perspectives. One is an investor, a consumer brand, and a packaging supplier. So sort of the whole ecosystem of it. And let's start with you. How is Colgate-Palmolive evolving its sustainability strategy to align with emerging consumer expectations and industry shifts, and particularly in areas like the circular economy?
Yeah, so our strategy, you mentioned the word evolving. We're rapidly approaching the end of 2025. So our current strategy is coming due, our targets that we've set for ourselves for 2025. And we've been very busy behind the scenes with lots of subject matter experts and business leaders working on our 2030 strategy. And it is going to be an evolution, not a revolution, because there's more work to be done. And in short, the way we do get things done is focus. Focus is a key muscle we have to have, I think, to get this work done. And the things that we focus on that are most material for Colgate are under our social impact ambition is to bring oral health and hygiene to kids in underserved communities all over the world. But under environment, we lean into climate, but also plastic. Plastic is one of the areas where we want to lead. And I'm really pleased to be here today with Chris, because Smurfit Westrock has played a really key role in moving our agenda forward there and helping us to meet our targets. Now, you mentioned the consumer. So the consumer obviously buys our products, and what we're trying to adapt to is a consumer that does not want to compromise on price, quality, or convenience, but at the same time, they do want it to be more sustainable. So that's the needle we have to thread. That's the journey we're on, and perhaps we'll get more into that in a minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're talking about the products being more sustainable from design to disposal. So how do you think of innovation in that process?
So innovation, our belief is that sustainability has to be built in from the start. That's not always easy, and as we try to bring consumers along, when we innovate, we have to somehow, and this is the way I say it, make our products better. And I noticed you just got done listening to Virginie from Procter & Gamble, and I long have admired their Tide cold water campaign. I use that as an example a lot. So they developed a superior formula of Tide. It gets your clothes just as cleaner, so no compromise on performance. And consumers use cold water, which is a huge carbon savings. But you don't see them talking to the consumer about carbon savings. They talk to the consumer about saving $150 on their energy bill. So who doesn't want to do that, right? So that's an example of building sustainability in, making the product better somehow for the consumer, which is what we're working on, whether it's toothpaste, which you probably, most of you know us for that, but we also make home care and personal care brands. An area that we're all leaning into very heavily right now is what we call concentration, but taking the water out of the product. So the consumer takes it home, and they can use it as is if they want it strong, or they can dilute it. So they have a little bit of customization ability there. But the benefit of not shipping water is huge carbon savings. And plastic, by the way. You use a lot less plastic if you concentrate the product.
Do you find that it also is cost effective? Because, right, you talk about customers don't want to pay more.
Right. So oftentimes when you come up with a more sustainable product, until it's scaled and optimized, it can cost more. In the case of concentration, there's a lot of benefit because you're using less plastic. So, you have to look at all angles. So as a sustainability leader, we're trying to balance all of these things, right? So cost is definitely a consideration. We have to be business partners, especially now more than ever, with all this uncertainty going on in the world. So we have to be pragmatic.
I've been hearing a lot about that, about the importance of collaboration, and I think this panel is a good example of all these different aspects working together towards this goal of a circular economy. Chris, let me ask you, so you are packaging, paper packaging, and all of that, right, for shipping, and what are some of the key challenges you encounter when aligning with customer sustainability goals, particularly when it comes to environmental impact and balancing that with what the brands need?
Sure. So I'll start off by saying that we're a relatively new company. We were formed in July of last year. We are one of the largest paper-based packaging solutions companies in the world. And when I think about challenges, I think probably the best example is thinking about where customers are, right? So obviously we have a partner who's very mature in terms of their sustainability pathway. But we work with customers all over the world, and some are just starting out, some are sort of in the middle, and some are very mature. So one of the biggest challenges that we have in my role, I'm helping our sales folks talk to customers, is just making sure we understand where that customer is in their journey, parsing that out, and then figuring out how to take what we believe is a very mature program and align it with their targets. So, for example, we have 59 paper mills around the world. We have over 200 converting facilities. So when a customer comes in who doesn't really understand our supply chain, they think, oh, well, if you guys are going to really focus on reducing your emissions, you got to do those converting facilities. You got 200 or 300 of them. But those converting facilities, if you look at the footprint, most of that is actually at the mills. So for a customer who maybe they purchase product that is made at 3 mills and converted at 10 converting plants, they say, please focus on those converting facilities. But from our perspective, we know where the real emissions savings can be had. And so you have to balance that conversation between what they're looking for in their mind around emissions today versus what we're trying to do as an organization, how we can still help them, but take into account, sort of the difficulties of that conversation, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And then, one big area, I'm talking about this, right, is emphasizing circularity, particularly because it's paper-based packaging. First of all, can you explain sort of how long this has been done, right, versus other things like recycling plastic is just still a big challenge. But how easy is it to tackle this side of it?
The circularity piece of it?
Mm-hmm.
So for us, circularity our whole business model is based on circularity. It starts in the forest. We have a renewable resource that we utilize. We bring that into our facilities. The trees are harvested. They're brought into the mill. We chip them up, create chips. Those chips go into a pulper, and we make pulp from that. We utilize the chemicals again. So we can burn the chemicals. We use water. We don't consume water. It's a process that reuses water. So there's circularity in the manufacturing process itself. Any waste paper that's created during the manufacturing or the converting, we bring that back into the process again. The product we sell, many of our products typically are highly recyclable. So we have one of the largest recycling operations globally. We have 63 recycling facilities globally, about 29 recycling facilities here in the US. So that's about 14 million tons of recovered fiber that we bring back in every year. And about half of that is going to be utilized by our own facilities. So the whole process from start to finish, if you think about it, from the forest through manufacturing out to our customers and then to their customers and then recycle back in as well.
And Anne mentioned collaboration as being key. How are you thinking about collaboration? What models are you using?
So collaboration, we've been partners for 23 years. We have one of our sales folks out in the audience, Chris. I see Chris right there. Chris has been working with Colgate for over 20 years. And that's the type of partnership that we're looking for, right? So it's where you understand. You have to establish a level of trust and help your partner understand that there are opportunities. Plastic replacement is a good example. But if you've been using a product for a long time, your business knows how to use it, your marketing team knows how to market it, and you're asking them to do something completely different. So taking that level of trust, trying out new things. We have designers, we have experience centers where we can bring customers in. They can take a challenge, right? And we can work together on fixing that challenge. So it's a process of knowing your customer, building trust, having the faith to work through the different iterations you may have to go through to come up with what I hope Anne believes is some good products in the end.
Yeah.
Sorry. Is my mic on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I think it was interesting to hear Chris say, I had never heard it said like that before, where your customers are on a different spectrum of maturity. We do the same thing, and our suppliers are on a different level of maturity.
Yeah.
And as you can probably tell, Smurfit Westrock is one of the more mature, very collaborative partners. Just some quick examples. One of our mainstay toothpaste is Total Toothpaste, and we did a big relaunch last year. And we now have a recyclable tube, which is great, but the cartons actually had PET layers in them for the aesthetics. So we partnered with your team to make the carton fully recyclable now. I mean, that didn't make sense, did it? To have a recyclable tube in a non-recyclable carton. So now the cartons are recyclable.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, we have an at-home whitening kit, and actually we counted on Smurfit Westrock to come up with the technology. We didn't do it. We said, here, this needs to be recyclable. They did it. So this is what we call collective action, but working together is so critical to
And shameless plug here, we have some of those out there for you to look at in our little lounge, so please stop by afterwards. You can see the actual cartons.
As well as the beds they used in the Olympic.
Exactly.
which
You
guys
stole it.
did.
I was going to actually mention that, but yeah, sure.
Oh, I did the plug for you
You did
then.
plug for me,
Okay,
okay,
you're
yeah.
welcome.
All right.
Now, Jim, let me turn to you next. So, you're from the investor perspective, which we don't normally think about when it comes to circularity. Can you tell us what characteristics around sustainability make a company as a compelling investment opportunity when it comes to things like this?
Thanks, Esther. So I would say first and foremost, as investors in public companies, we push for companies to disclose relevant and important financially material sustainability information. So that's grounded in our process. Sustainable issues matter from a societal perspective. From an investment perspective, it's got to be financially material to the health of the company. So several criteria we look at. What's the size of the addressable market? What's the likely growth of that market over the long term? Is there a clear need for it? Will there be a reasonable price or cost differential with whatever the existing material is, such that it will be easily adopted by the market? And where customers are, as I thought it was an interesting point that both Chris and Ann made, was different companies, different parts of the supply chain are at different parts of the journey, different parts of the world are at different parts of their sustainability journey. And we as investors have to recognize that and factor that into our process as to, okay, what will the financial return be on sustainability investments?
And then where are you seeing the most exciting circular economy innovations? Like what's really, you're like, wow, I can't wait till this actually comes to full fruition.
You mean like the cardboard bed outside? I would say I followed a bunch of different industries, packaging being one of them, building construction materials being another, but some industries that have very high carbon footprints, very capital intensive industries oftentimes, and oftentimes there's high switching costs. So when I look at opportunities, I would say I'm normally fairly skeptical when I hear of cool new products, because this isn't tech, and oftentimes the industries I follow are very slow to move and slow to adopt. So I have to come at it with a level of kind of underlying skepticism, but seeing some really interesting things starting to develop. Construction materials, reusable materials there, starting to see some innovation. Certainly in packaging, lightweighting has been something that's been going on for a long time and continues apace. Plastic substitution is certainly gaining steam in Europe, and I think increasingly here in the U.S. as well. I think you're starting to see things like aluminum, recyclable aluminum, like this bottle here, replacing a PET single-use bottle. So there's certain areas of packaging where I think there's really interesting things that are becoming kind of growth angles.
Mm-hmm. And again, the theme of partnerships. How do you evaluate a company's ability to leverage partnerships, and how does that factor in as a driver of a competitive advantage in your mind?
So I think, particularly with packaging, and it's a really good example here on the stage, with a 20+ year partnership, with supply chain partners. I've been following the packaging industry for 25 years. It's oftentimes a very cutthroat, transactional business where price matters above all else. And it's really rare, to see that type of long-term partnership. But there are certainly benefits. Again, if you're part of the supply chain that's somewhat embedded in your customers' operations, you're innovating, helping them innovate new products. You're delivering the product on time at a reasonable price. You basically become a long-term part of that company's supply chain, and there's less switching costs, there's less impact on your own operations from that, and over the long term, it becomes a more profitable symbiotic relationship. So, I think that is something that certainly we look for as investors is a supply chain partner, truly a partner to their customers. Are they serving them? Are they meeting the innovation needs? Are they collaborating with R&D efforts and initiatives? So I think all those things come into play as to determine whether we make an investment in a company or not.
So kind of a gut check on whether they're actually doing what they say they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And part of the process as an investor is to not just listen to the company you might be investing in, but also their customers, their supply chain partners, and over time trying to figure out, okay, is this company really walking the walk or just talking the talk?
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a phrase, evolution, not a revolution. Can you dig into that a little bit? One of the big questions right now this year, particularly in the US, is like, how are companies responding to geopolitics and trade policy and all of that? And is this evolution, not a revolution, a reflection of that? Or is it something bigger, and how do you interpret that?
I want to address that point first. I think hopefully what you're hearing is that most companies are careful about what they're saying, their narrative, but we're sticking to the program. We're getting the work done. Maybe we're not amplifying it, but here we are at Climate Week. This is the biggest ever. I was actually wondering. I got a lot more emails about London Action Climate Week this year, so I thought, maybe people are going there, not here, but here we are. So I'm pleased that there's so much discussion going on here. But I think the way I think of it is, and this is what our teams have been working on, if you think of sustainability kind of in eras, kind of like, and we paralleled, our strategy really paralleled these eras. So 2015 to 2020 was kind of ramping up, and you were getting into the 2018, 2019, 2020, companies were starting to put major goals out there, big targets that they honestly weren't quite sure how they were going to make, but they knew it was important and everybody was making them. And then you got into 2020 to 2025 where we were just closing out, and we've been focused on action. We've made great progress. We haven't hit everything on the nose. We're partnering. We're understanding what it's going to cost to get it done. We haven't got that all figured out yet. But now, okay, a lot of companies are getting ready to talk about what are we going to get done between now and 2030. So now enter the era of reality, value creation, setting targets that are ambitious but achievable, right? And so we're building on the strategy, our 2025 strategy. So when we roll it out early next year, if you were to look at it, it's not going to look massively different than our current strategy. We're going to stay focused on oral health for children. We're going to stay focused on plastic. We're going to stay focused on climate. Those are our lead, we call them our swords, where we want to lead. There's other stuff we have to get done, and we call that our shields. But we're leaning much more heavily into the business case and becoming true business partners, because we're competing with a lot of priorities for the business right now, influenced by everything going on around us. And we can't go a whole panel without saying the word AI. So AI is a part of that. So we're competing with, the funds that we need to fuel our business through AI. And we're excited about AI as well, because we think that there's a lot of terrific use cases. That's a whole nother panel, I'm sure, but there's a lot of great use cases for sustainability.
I just build on that just 1 second, going quickly. So, because I was having dinner with our team last night, and I mentioned a study that I'd just seen along those lines, because we're hearing a lot about people are, pulling back, companies are not keeping their promises, et cetera. But this was a study, I think it was over 1,000 companies in 2025, and they asked them about investment in sustainability. 87% of those companies are either going to maintain or increase investment in sustainability this year.
Yeah.
11% said that they're either cutting back or just doing compliance. So I mean, we are definitely in the public sphere. Maybe we're hearing less, but in my job, every week I'm having conversations with organizations like ANS or others, and they're just continuing to ask for the same thing. They want us they want to understand our impacts, how we can work together to reduce their impacts. So it's still a very, very important piece of what we need to do every day.
And what are you hearing, Jim? Are you hearing the same thing, or it's maybe a bit of a reckoning for those who maybe got ahead of their skis, but in general, they're still going full steam ahead on what they can?
Yeah, that's generally what I'm hearing, and you're starting to see it. I mean, I think Colgate received a shareholder proposal in the last meeting to kind of walk back some of your plastic reduction goals, right? And I think that was a proposal that we voted against. And we support the company and what they're doing and the progress that they're making on those goals. And it doesn't seem to be affecting the business performance. Again, it comes down to financial materiality. And does the plastic reduction program or some of the other sustainability initiatives at Colgate, if they were to walk those back, we have to think long term. Is this going to affect the company's financial health 5, 10 years down the road? And our decision was, this is something that should continue, and there's a risk to the business if they don't continue. I think most companies still feel that way.
And I think I'm hearing that from the investor side. It's like the risk is still there, right? From the transition and physical, and it's getting worse and worse. And so really, they're still asking those questions in meetings. They're still, but whether it's being discussed publicly as much, right? And on the podcast, we had JP Morgan coming on. Almost every company we've talked to, even oil and gas companies, are still working towards a lot of their goals. So it's sort of what you hear the pushback publicly versus what companies are still sort of nose to the ground on.
I think we have to do a better job of connecting why we're doing this to the long-term resilience and growth. That's the value creation. So, if we're talking in the context, like we buy a lot of corrugate products from Smurfit Westrock. Those ultimately come from pulp and paper, right? Pulp. And so we need to lean into regenerative ag and recovery and making sure that the source product that we need for the long term is responsibly sourced. So it's not, we can talk all about the rhetoric around we're woke or not woke or whatever the case may be, which is the shareholder proposal. But I think we understand and believe this is what we need to do for the long-term financial health of the company, like you said, Jim.
One thing I've been hearing in podcast interviews at our booth up at the front and also some of the events I've attended so far is what you were talking about wording and language, but specifically solving the problem that the customer, whatever that may be, has. You're talking about understanding your customers, and often it's not like climate or ESG or that kind of a thing. It's like, no, I'm going to lower your water bill, or I'm going to, right? So talk a little bit more about what are some of the solutions that really still align with climate or sustainability, but maybe you're not using that word.
Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples. So one thing that I did want to mention was one of our mills in Italy, our Verzuolo mill. When you recycle, use recovered fiber, when you're recycling paper, Typically, the recovered fiber that's coming in may have some impurities. It may have some plastic, maybe some glass, maybe a little bit of other stuff, maybe some metals. And that obviously is not what we're going to use. So that typically will go to a landfill. Whereas took a very innovative approach, and they basically used flotation technology, water flotation, and they invested $45 million. And now they're they've reduced their landfill, I think somewhere, my comms people are looking at me to make sure I get it right, 75% reduction in landfill. And that's the type of innovation in terms of thinking about circularity, because that plastic that they're recovering is now going to be used for other things. So we're not using it, but other plastic producers can put it to a better use than just going to landfill. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's one example. I'm just going to mention the bed because it's so cool. So 2024 Olympics, right? Paris wanted to be the most sustainable Olympics in the world. We had a patented product, the Olympic bed. You can go out and see it. 35 pieces, lots of design, lots of testing, can handle 100 kilograms of weight. But the beauty of it was over 16,000 beds were used for that event. They were then taken to our mills in France, recovered, recycled, and made into wine boxes, which of course is very apropos. So just two examples of, not typically things you'd think about when you think about a paper packaging company, but innovative ways to continue to use paper, corrugated paperboard, all those types of different solutions in new innovative ways and increasing circularity.
And wondering if you had another example beyond some of the ones you mentioned.
I think, we're kind of really anchoring the conversation a bit in cool innovations or things you wouldn't. We really do need new technology, true innovation, true out-of-the-box thinking to move us forward. I guess one example I would use, we spend a lot of time not just on our own packaging, but on the value chain around that. So with recyclers, with NGOs that are helping. I mean, just look at the US. We don't recycle like we should, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We came out with the first recognized recyclable tube. Tubes haven't traditionally been recyclable, so we had to do a lot of work. My good colleague, as known as Ann B, is in the audience, and that's her job, to work with the recycling industry to make sure they accept the tube readily. And so one of the cool innovations is a visual recognition powered by AI. We're working with companies to now, it can actually see not only the tubes coming down the sorting aisle of a MRF, but it can tell if it's a Colgate toothpaste tube or a Aquafresh or a Crest. So, we can get a lot more data. It's AI powered, it learns. We can put that data to work to show and prove that, these tubes are going where they should go. And data is king. I mean, data will demonstrate and break ties, so.
But, sorry, I just want to again mention, so we talked about partnerships. Obviously, we have a great partnership. But the other key to increasing circularity is to work with organizations that, they may not necessarily have thought about going down this path. But you bring in a solution like, so everybody knows the plastic rings for bottles and cans. We worked with an organization here in this area, Coke Liberty, and we're able to help them to move their PET bottles and their mini cans to new paperboard solutions. So again, increasing recyclability. It's a solution that they love because now they also have not just the recyclable piece of it, but they're able to do more branding on that package for their customers.
Because it's paper, it can be printed on much easier than the plastic.
Exactly.
That's interesting, yeah. Well, we're down to 1 minute, so I guess it's time for me to do some of my thoughts on, I wrote down so many notes, so I'm gonna try to make it succinct. But I thought what you said about evolution, not a revolution, is an important thing, because I think there is so much we have to do, right? And it can get overwhelming, but what I'm hearing is continue making these things, find partnerships, find ways to innovate, find investors who can help you get there. And then also what you said, all of you talked about customers and knowing them and building trust, whether it's the consumer who's buying or partnerships you're working with there. The collective action was another term I heard mentioned. And I think action is really like probably the word for the week in my mind from what I've heard so far. We really have needed for a long time to move past talking, right, and to see action. And it's really encouraging to hear the ways that all of you are trying to put that to practice. So thank you very much for a fantastic panel, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.